Video 1, an introduction to Rei-flexology and the language of the feet. In 1987, when I first stumbled into feet, I was a total skeptic. Hi, I'm Christine Lynn Stormer Fryer, aka Chris Stormer, known worldwide as the Universal Foot Lady. It is now 33 years, the angelic number, that I have been in feet, and I am passionate about them. I was honored to channel through the universal approach to feet in 1990. Now, I'm using charts that I have taken around the world for all these years, and some of them got a little bit wet. But I am going to use them anyway because they have some very useful information. So why did I choose to call it the universal approach to feet? Because reflexology has been around centuries, and there are so many different approaches. And the wonderful thing is, because there's so many people in the world, and we all have different backgrounds, different cultures, and different beliefs, that it is really great that there are so many different techniques. The universal approach I see as being the one approach for everybody. The reason being is that it's very adaptable. It can be incorporated in other approaches. It also incorporates other approaches. So for me, the universal approach to feet was the one that opened up to everybody. When I first channeled through the universal approach to feet, people complained that they were getting better too quickly. That was at a time when we needed more time to process. But with all the chaos and the energy speeding up in the world, the universal approach to feet is absolutely fantastic. Uni is one and versal is voice. It is also referred to as Rei-flexology. Reiki being an energetic healing, and flexology working with the reflexes on the feet. So, shall we begin? But to begin, we really need to understand what it is to be a human being, because the whole body is reflected in miniature onto the feet. Being human, we talk about being human beings, is being a person with many hues, colors, manifesting on this planet. And the more vibrant we are, the more vibrant the hues are. So the colors of the rainbows of the parts of the body vibrate to beautifully. And from these colors and these hues, we can understand what is going on in a person's life, which is really important when it comes to understanding what the feet are trying to tell us. Starting with the head. The main organ in the head, of course, is the brain. And hopefully we use that brain to think. And as we think, as you can see, I'm using my hands. So our hands are an extension of our thoughts, as are our feet, because if we were just sitting all day thinking and writing and drawing and creating, we would get very, very bored. So the universe gave us some feet so that we could take those ideas and spread them far and wide. So when people have issues with the head, which are reflected into the toes, then they're also going to possibly have issues with their hands and their feet. If they have issues with their hands, they're having difficulty in handling those ideas, knowing what to do with them. If they have issues with their feet, then they're having issues with getting those ideas out and about. The color the head vibrates to is indigo violet, which of course is a very ethereal color, so the actual energy is ether, because thoughts are non-physical. We then take those thoughts and we express them. The part that shows is how we are thinking, and how we express those thoughts, of course, is the forehead. This is linked to the neck and the shoulders. When we are very anxious, we start hunching the shoulders. We also, as we get older, as you can well see, we develop these wrinkles. They're not a sign of old age only. It's often because we have been strangulated. I was brought up in a generation where children were seen, not heard, and I had to swallow a lot of my words. Not that I'm making excuses, I'm just understanding. So the other parts that are also linked with expression are our wrists and our ankles. The more flexible our wrists, the more flexible our expression. And likewise with our ankles. If we can adapt to life's ups and downs, then of course our ankles are free. Then we have the eyes. Whatever we take in through our eyes affects how we breathe. So it affects the respiratory system as well as the circulatory system. This is also linked to our emotions, which I shall talk about in another video. It's also linked to the lower half of the arms and the lower half of the lower legs. So if a person, for example, cuts themselves on their arm, particularly older people, they will often develop pneumonia because they're feeling very cut up emotionally. And the other thing about the words we use when it comes to illness and diseases is listening carefully to what they say. When a person develops pneumonia, they invariably don't have anything new to moan about, pneumonia. So it affects the chest area. Going on, then we got the nose. Now we sniff out opportunities, things get up our nose. We have the cheek to get on and do things, and whatever we hear affects how we act and how we react. Now this has an impact on our upper digestive tract and also the upper halves of our arms and the upper halves of our legs. Then, of course, we have the mouth, the good old mouth. The mouth is obviously very connected to our communications, relationships, because whatever we let out of our mouth is going to affect our relationships. And whatever we take in our mouth is going to affect the lower digestive tract if it's unsettling or unpleasant or whatever. But I'm going to go through all these bit by bit as we go through the videos. The other part, finally, is the chin. Now the chin, when a person talks with their chin very static, you know that they're very uncertain about what they're saying. And of course, we know a lot of people, particularly in the politics, who will speak like this and never ever buy a car from a car salesman who talks like this because he's going to sell you a bit of rubbish. So this is connected to our pelvic area. So already you can see the body is speaking an incredible language that the feet pick up. So let's take this a step further. Colors are very important because as human beings, they are the manifestation, as I said, of the many hues. And how we are manifesting those hues will determine their vibrancy. It can be used to energize and it can be used to calm. So when it comes to moving ahead, it's the inclination of the body. We can get a lot of clues. Now, if you're a practitioner or if you're just a general person who likes to observe people, you will notice that often the head is projected forward when a person is wanting to move ahead in life. If they're not, they tend to hold their head back. The way they walk is also very, very significant. You know, obviously somebody who runs is going to be wanting to get somewhere much faster or is running away from something as opposed to somebody who's dragging their feet. When we look at a person, we can see which parts are predominant. So we can pick up quite a lot when our clients or people who come for reflexology, we can see what is going on in their life even before they've taken their shoes off. As we walk ahead, we're walking into our future and we're leaving our past behind. And the interesting thing is that our body, one hand will go forward and the opposite foot will go forward as they get a feel for what the future is going to be like. The other one stays in the past until we're ready to let go. Now, the interesting thing is, again, that if we're a bit hesitant about going into the future, we will withdraw that hand and foot and stay where we are. So again, the movement of the hands and feet are very indicative of how willing a person is to embrace their future and how willing they are to let go of their past. So using the word human, here you emotionally manifest altogether new beginnings. There are 6 main areas that I shall be sharing with you, and you will start understanding more and more as I go on. One of the reasons I was a skeptic when first stumbling into feet was because there were over 27 different charts, and each chart was slightly different. And for me, having been 10 years in the medical field, I really could not understand how the body could change so much. The one organ particularly that concerned me that was going on safari was the heart reflex. But then I thought about it, and the heart does affect the whole body, therefore the whole foot. But being the medical person that I am, I then decided, no, I had to see this in anatomical form to really understand it. And this is when the feet really came alive for me. This is when I really started to understand what they were saying. So I set up the Rei-flexology Academy of Southern Africa in 1991. And at that time, I was starting to channel through books. One of my students said, "What on earth are you doing? If you write a book, you're going to do yourself out of a job." So I said, "Okay, that's fine. I'll just find something else to do." Well, 33 years later, as I said, I'm still traveling the world. I was until COVID. The first book was translated into German. And of course, I was very delighted because I'd never even seen myself as an authoress. They then asked me to please précis the book. In fact, the book that came out was even twice the size of the first book. But it's a very popular book. It has become the Reflexologist's Handbook. So these books will also help you understand the universal approach to healing. This is my second book, which was translated into 5 languages. And I think it's still being translated into other languages as well. I'm incredibly grateful to Hodder and Stoughton because thanks to them publishing my books, I was getting a name worldwide, which really helped me travel. The most important thing for me was to spread this universal information far and wide, not just through the books, but also through presentations and workshops. I was one day traveling with my husband on business, and I was asked to drive back a car because he was working in the car business. And I had my Lazarus or Lazarus tapes with me. He spoke about chakras, bearing in mind I was a medical person and was not too aware of all this wafty stuff. But I listened as he explained the impact of these energy centers on the body. I thought, surely, if these are throughout the body, then they must be reflected onto the feet. And that was how the language of the feet came to be born. First of all, I had this candy floss chart, which I thought was very colorful, but not actually completely accurate. Obviously, we learn as we go along. But you know, the wonderful thing about feet is that everything is everything else. So it all resonates together. So I'm incorporating with the universal approach to feet, the actual language of the feet and how to understand the feet. It works beautifully with reflexology. It's not about reading the feet and telling the person what's going on in their life. How do we know? Everybody has their own story. So it's about understanding what is that person's stories and what are the questions I should be asking that person. It is very, very simple once you get the gist of the chakras, colors, and elements, because then you have the combination of what to ask. And I'm going to go through it step by step. But this is very basically how it works. The toes are how we think, the toe necks reflecting the neck area show how we express those thoughts. Then we have the balls of the feet, which represent the chest area and our emotions. We have the upper halves of the instep, which is very much to do with our upper digestive tract. Then we have the lower halves, which is to do with the communication relationships. And then finally, we have the heels: family, society, mobility, stability. When we dig our heels in, we don't want to do what we've been told to do. Very much a family society thing. The colors: purple, blue, just like the rainbow, green, yellow, orange, and red. And then the elements are ether, air, fire, water, and earth. Because everything is everything else, we can then take this a step further. And the energies run from each of the toes through the whole body, both ways. So for example, as you can see here, if a client came or a person came to you and said, "Look, I've got a real pain," let's put it here. Now it's under communications, so it's something to do with their communications. It's in the feeling area and it's in the family part. If you look here, it's the family part. So the 3 things to ask that client would be to say, okay, how are you feeling about your communications within your family? You haven't put any ideas in their head, and then you get the story. So you can see how it correlates from the body into the feet. So when there is an issue, you can take it from where we were here up to here. If the person's got a pain in the chest, you can do the reverse and look at the feet and see what is going on at a deeper level. How does reflexology work? I spoke about energy. Where do we get our energy from? Well, we manufacture most of it, but we obviously have to also draw on outer sources. So we draw our energy from the sun. That is the father energy. We talk about father-sun, a very positive energy. And we draw negative energy very grounding energy from the earth. That is mother energy. Now, when we get uptight and tense, what will happen is the very happy little cell is not going to get all its nutrients. And it's also going to be squeezed and squashed, which will cause a bit of congestion in the body. It feels like a block. Some people refer to this as crystals. I don't personally like crystals because it's more a tension area. It's an area where the energy cannot get through. So what will happen is when you're pressing the feet, when we put our finger or thumb on the foot, the energy will go through the body. And if it's interceded by a tense area, it will then bounce back to the foot, and that can be felt in the foot. So this way, it's very easy to find out areas which are very, very, very tense. The other way of determining where there is tension in the body is to look at the shoes. Now, when the client arrives, you invite the client to put their feet into a foot bath, and these shoes will give you a very, very good idea of where all the tension and the pressure is. And if you just look at your client's shoes, now these are very easy because they're flip-flops, they're open, but you can see the areas that are very worn out. Now, those are the areas that can be focused on, to have a look at them. When you look at the feet, look at those areas and say, what is going on? Also on the bottoms, doesn't show up so well here, you can see which areas are worn out. That again will be areas that are tense, heavy going, and so on. So looking at the shoes and feet, and by the end of these series of videos, you'll be able to read the shoes as well. From time to time, people feel a lot of pressure in life. We call this stress. We need stress in our life. If we did not have stress in our life, we would not be upright. It's distress that is the concern. And often people fall apart. So reflexology has often been referred to as taking the body into the workshop and getting it fixed. But it's not just about fixing the distressed parts. It's also about maintaining good health. And reflexology is fantastic at maintaining good health. I haven't had reflexology for years. I used to have it regularly. It was fantastic. I mean, all my students used to do my feet, and I was very, very buoyant. Last night, Ruth did my feet, and boy, did I feel the difference. I just, over one treatment, years of tension just disappeared. So when we're using language of the feet, first of all, please remember that whenever we address a person or they come to us, it's an honor for them to bear their souls, because the souls, S-O-L-E, are picking up what's going on at the soul level. So this is to be not taken lightly. I always thank very quietly the person who puts their feet up in front of me. And I also asked for guidance from the divine source, because it's not about me. I'm just the conduit. It's about the person, and it's about what's going on at their soul level. So I have to get out of our own way, get into our hearts, and the first thing to do is take some deep breaths in, invite the client to do the same. And then to get a soul impression, look for the soul essence. Everybody has a soul essence. It is the essence with which we were born. Some people have a childlike essence. Now, those are the souls who often don't have a very good childhood, or have had to grow up quickly because one of the parents have died, or there's many reasons, and their need is to actually live that childlike experience. There are very many angels on this planet, which is fantastic. Their feet have an essence of wings. They don't want feet. They want to fly around the place. They're often the people who are there to help other people through their hardships. Then you get the old soul, the wise soul. And that is something you can't teach. It's something that just you know. You know if you just trust the universe. So the first thing is to get their soul essence. Then to get the general impression of the toes, because what will happen if a person's a thinker, the toes will appear more dominant than the soles of the feet. If they're a doer, their soles will appear more dominant than the toes because they're holding back their ideas. We're going to look at the stature of toes, the shape of toe pads, look at the direction at which those toe pads are going, because again, the toes should be facing forward. But if the toes are turning to the right, which is the past, then of course they're turning away from the present and they're looking back all the time. If the toes turn to the left, they're looking to the future all the time. And both are missing out on the present. They're not facing life on. So these are sort of things we're going to be looking at. The characteristics of each toe. and also the length of the toe necks. Then we've got the general observations. We're going to look at the balls of the feet. I'm going to go through these step by step, upper insteps, lower insteps, and heels, all of which are relevant. The secondary reflexes also cause a bit of confusion when it comes to the foot charts. The soles of the feet are the front of the body and the tops of the feet are the back of the body. So, for example, the breast reflexes are found on the balls of the feet, but on many charts they're also shown on the tops of the feet. Not that this is wrong in any way, because it's a secondary access. Because if you think about it, the breast extends from the front of the body almost to the back of the body. So it's just accessing that particular organ indirectly. When I was first prompted to write a book on reflexology by the universe, I went to the UK because I live in South Africa. And I was guided to this beautiful lady, Nicola Hall, which many of you will know. And she put me in touch with the British Institute of Complementary Therapies. I took with me the charts I had of the anatomical forms on the feet. And so she put me in touch with Hodder and Stoughton, and I had a meeting with them in a coffee shop in Covent Garden. And spread over the coffee table were all these charts I was showing this lady. But in the meantime, we attracted this massive audience who were fascinated by what they saw. And they said, yes, they would publish the book, and I just needed to submit a synopsis. So that was the first book. When it came to the language of the feet, it was 600 pages, and publishers do not like 600 pages. So I took it around the world. I took it to Australia. I contacted people in America, and it was rejected 5 times. Eventually, Hodder and Stoughton said, look, if you can chop it down, then of course we'll publish it. That was the very first book, which was very much where the cartoon pictures are coming from, and it was more like a dictionary. So then they asked me, could I please do it again? And I was able to put more details about color, energy, and so on. So that was the second copy. This was translated into Japanese, and I was later invited to Japan. So some of these charts actually have Japanese on them too. What I love about feet is we can understand so much about ourselves. The amazing thing is our feet are underneath us and we stand on them. So there's no surprise really that we get so much understanding from them. What is so important, as I said earlier, is the story, the history. Now, if we go to a medical doctor, he wants to know the medical history. The feet are going to show us the emotional, spiritual history. It is fascinating. So we can understand what is going on because they pick up everything that is going on underfoot. I, to the horror of many, never ask the client questions when they arrive. All I want to know is their name so I can greet them and possibly how I can contact them. After that, I let the feet talk to me. People will tell us what they think you want to hear. You know, we all do that when we go to the doctor or people like that. I don't want to hear that. They've told the postman, they've told the milkman, they've told their neighbors and their family, and they've told everyone. But it's the feet that will tell the absolute truth of what's going on. When it comes to footwear, the choice is going to show how a person is thinking. The color is going to show how they are feeling. The style is going to be adapted to their actions and their reactions. What are they using it for? The size. When a person has difficulty in finding the shoes to fit them or suit them, it's because they're often having difficulty in fitting into the confines of society. And this is often why shoes wear away at certain parts or the heel is worn down. It gives so many clues as to how that person is fitting in or not fitting in. Non-conservative people have greater difficulty in finding shoes that suit them. And then, of course, how much of the foot is covered up and which parts are covered up are also indicative. You don't have to be too analytical about all this, but it just gives us clues to what is going on at a deeper level. So talking about stories, I'll share a little bit about my story because everybody's story is different. I was born in Colonia, Kenya. My father was an army officer, so yes, it was a yes sir, no sir upbringing, which is absolutely perfect because I came in as a free spirit. I was very privileged with the people I met as I grew up and also the experiences I had, like climbing Mount Kilimanjaro when I was a teenager and Mount Kenya. I was also very, very fascinated by nature, and in Kenya in those days, we had very few toys. I got my very first teddy when I was 5 years old. And in the meantime, I played in nature. And that led to an incredible imagination for which I'm incredibly grateful, because I don't have to have external things to stimulate my mind other than my charts. I was also very interested in nursing and caring for other people. And while I've been traveling in the world with the feet, I realized that we choose what we do in life because we're all processing our life issues, our family issues. So I chose nursing because I needed to nurse my emotional wounds. I also loved ballet. This is me being a fairy. So I was doing pantomimes at the age of 10. I had such a varied and beautiful upbringing. I chose to go to boarding school because both my parents were working and my brother was being a brother and he was being a bother. So I decided I would go away from him. I then went to England from Kenya to do my nurse training at St. Thomas's Hospital, which is where my great-grandmother had nursed. I then decided I'd like to be a midwife because I had fallen in love with those Mills and Boon romantic novels, particularly The Flying Doctor in Australia. So I did midwifery. But instead of ending up in Australia, I ended up in Texas. In the meantime, I had become very, very depressed. I had even become suicidal. And when I was an occupational sister at Charing Cross Hospital, I even stood on the 13th floor ledge of the nurse's home and was about to jump. But then I thought, gosh, I'll make such a mess down there. So I climbed back through the window. I'm really glad I did, actually, because life has been fantastic since then. But I think so many people go through these suicidal tendencies and just want to give up everything. So anyway, in Texas, I nearly married a Texan who had just come out of prison. Life is never boring. My parents found out about it, came and took me back to England, and I went on to do health visiting. So I met my husband, previous husband, my starter husband, in England, and we got married and decided that we couldn't afford to have children, so we would emigrate. We thought of America and ended up in South Africa. And this, of course, is where I've been since 1980 and love it. I was very blessed at that time when I did stumble into reflexology and eventually do a training course, which actually I did not like at all. I was going to have absolutely nothing to do with feet, but the universe said, yes, you are. So then I opened up a health studio with my friend, and people just wanted reflexology. It was very, very new in those days, and people were intrigued. And I was so blessed because my starter husband was in advertising. So I had a lot of media coverage in radio, television, newspapers. I was invited to do lots of talks, which was fantastic, for schools, libraries, companies. I did expos to expose more of what reflexology was about, and even did a feat of a few celebs. So I was very, very blessed at that time of getting the word out of reflexology. I must have known at some stage that I was going to be doing posters. We choose our occupations to heal ourselves. So I first did the nursing, as I said, to heal my emotional wounds. Then I did midwifery to bring the birth of new ideas through. And then I became a health visitor, which of course embraces every aspect of community, from the baby being born to the older people. When I was the occupational sister at the Charing Cross Hospital, a lot of people were pricking themselves with needles and weren't being very careful. So I decided to do this poster. And apparently it was very, very effective. And it even ended up in the Nursing Times. Now that is 1974. So already I was passionate about expressing through artwork. As I said, I channeled through this Rei-flexology. And I didn't even know what channeling was. I just knew that all this information was coming through and I didn't know where it was coming from. I wasn't meditating, I wasn't doing any of those things, but I hadn't read the information, I hadn't seen it on television. And then I thought, what is going on here? And somebody said, you're channeling it through from a higher source. So then Hodder and Starton asked me to channel, because I actually put on my first book that my guide had been running water, who is a Red Indian. And of course, Hodder and Starton are very conservative. So they were quite interested about what's this lady talking about now. So when they asked me to write a book on channeling, it is not the easiest thing to do because you do it intuitively. Anyway, I did it. And at first there were 2 editions that came out. During this time, I was very, very blessed. I did crystal healing, Reiki, kinesiology, Shinzen Shitsu, Feng Shui, meditation, and rebirthing, and a whole lot more courses. And I was able to incorporate this into the Rei-flexology. As I said earlier, it's a beautiful technique. There is no one way of doing it. And the more one brings into it and is guided by the person's soul, then so much the better the treatment. I had the gift of divorce. Now, many people will find that a very fascinating thing to say, but I would never have left my marriage, and it wasn't working for me. I had two beautiful boys, and thankfully, my starter husband had the courage to walk away. If he hadn't, I would have been a housewife. Nothing that's wrong with that, but I wasn't meant to just stay at home looking after children. It forced me to find work to do. It forced me into reflexology. And before I knew it, I was being invited to China in 1991 to do a presentation there. There were 3,000 people from all over the world, and they're from 27 different countries. And I started getting invitations to do more conferences. And one of the things is that why do something that has been done before? Because it's been done before, and reflexology has been around for centuries now. So one of the things that I was striving to do was to see what else is there to the feet? What else is there to massaging them? How can we really, really understand what the client is wanting? The only thing was that when you start stepping out of bounds, you're considered too visionary. I always remember at one meeting we were having of the reflexology schools in Johannesburg, and one of the ladies stood up and she said, "Chris Stormer, the trouble with you is that you're 5 years ahead of us." And I thought, is that a compliment or is that criticism? But basically, I started realizing that what I was doing was bringing in other aspects of reflexology. Anyway, it got me invited to fly around the world, and I thank my organizers and the delegates, because without them, I could not have done it. Over the years, I've had over 60 organizers, and I have been to most continents in the world. So I have been truly, truly blessed, but I could not have done it without them. So here's a Japanese chart, and this is about the energy. And again, this is going to give us incredible insight as to how can we communicate with our client and what are the questions to ask them. As I said earlier, the toes are very much about our thinking. It's very much about the beliefs. One of the things that makes people sick, one of the main reasons that makes people sick, are our belief systems, particularly if they're very rigid. So you have different types of belief, which I will talk about. Some of it will strengthen, some will weaken. Then the expression, the feelings, actions and reactions, communications, and family. So again, we've got the purple, the blue, the green, yellow, orange, and red. And the ether, air, fire, water, and earth. So it's elementary that what will actually happen with the feet. If there's too much of a particular element, it's going to be overwhelming. So for example, if there's too much air, you'll find the balls of the feet will get very heavy. And anything to do with air in the body, be it a burp or flatulence or an air embolism, is to do with emotions that have been unexpressed. When the body doesn't have enough air, then the balls of the feet become looking very deflated, flat, etc. When it comes to fire, of course, that's going to affect the temperature of the feet. And where does that heat come from? It comes from doing what we're doing or not doing what we're not doing, the frustration, the anger. So again, with the feet, if the person is very frustrated, then often the feet will get very, very hot. Now, it's not just in the areas that I've put, but it's, again, could be the whole foot. But where it comes from is the doing area. Any fluid excess or lack of comes from communication relationships. Anything to do with something that's very solid like spurs, then that comes very much from family, society. The other useful thing about this is because society tends to blame the external world for their ills and diseases, uneasiness, we can also see what is really going on. So if a person is complaining that they've got a chest complaint because of the wind, then straight away we know there's something emotionally going on. For example, also with little ones, a lot of memories get trapped in the cells. And little ones love to run around and play, and often they will trip up, say, over a rock or a stone or whatever, and they will cut their knees, and the knee will be full of dirt and will start bleeding. Now, as a society, what is the mother's reaction? Oh, what's going on? You've fallen, how terrible. And look how dirty that is. We're going to have to take you to the doctor, get stitches. Now, what that actually does, it panics the child. And that memory is stuck in the cells. If, on the other hand, she's calm about the situation, say, oh, let's go and wash it. Okay, let's have a look and see what's going on. But more than that, you can take that a step further. Firstly, the rock that the child tripped over. That means there's some rocky issues going on in the family that the child is picking up, which now, because children reflect the mother, the child is cut up about because of the inflexibility. It's the knee is the flexibility, and the cut is showing how emotionally cut up. Blood is always an outpouring of unhappiness. And then, of course, the dirt. We talk about sweeping the dirt under the carpet. Well, again, there's stuff going on that if it's allowed to get in the way, it could possibly cause a bit of infection, i.e. frustration. Can you see the stories that we can take from just understanding what is going on around us, how the outside world is reflecting what's going on in the inside world? Health is always dependent on not too much or not too little of anything. Too much or too little is taking it to the two extremes. And when I'm talking, I will try and cover both extremes if possible. So looking at the soles of the feet, when you're looking at the soles, the right foot is the male energy, the left foot is the female energy. We have come from the combination of sperm and ova. So we have both male energy and female energy in us. The male energy is more dominant, obviously, in men. Female energy more dominant in female, although we do get that crossover these days as well. So the appearance of the feet is going to give us many, many clues. The right foot is very much to do with males, so any dominant issues on the right side of the body or the right foot is often associated with men. But also because it's the past, it's often connected to people who are older than us, who've been here before us. The left side is more likely to be issues with females if there are issues on the left side of the body or the left foot. Also, because it's the future, could be issues with the people younger than us. So there's quite a few things to take into consideration. The feet will tell us so many things. For example, the liver is very much to do on the male side because it stores energy. It stores what has been done. On the left side, it's the stomach because the stomach processes in the here and now. When it comes to understanding what a person is going through, then again, we look at the male-female side as well. Because the male is the past side, remember, and that's the right side, if a person has a difficulty in exhaling, then there is a difficulty in letting go of something masculine in their life. If they are hanging on too much to stuff, then again, they're hanging on from insecurity. They're hanging on to what was done or not done in the past. If the muscles have difficulty in contracting or they're having difficulty in excreting, then of course, again, it's a male issue. And this is both male and female. The right side gives of its energy to the left side. And that is where we get a lot of our knowledge from. So when it comes to other aspects like taking in air, if a person has difficulty in breathing in, there could be an issue, female issue of some sort. If they're having difficulty in processing, taking in new life and processing it, again, look at what's going on with the females in their life. Then, of course, if they're having difficulty in expanding and progressing, then again, it could be a female issue. When we're looking at the feet, we're also looking at the front, side, and back. Now, interesting enough, obviously, the sides are very much to do with what's been going on in the sides, very much to do with family and society. When we're looking at the outer edge, that is very much, again, to do with how we are expanding. And we'll look at the bones and projections as we're going along. If there's anything that's protruding, it's needing more space. If it's collapsing, then, of course, it's giving in. So again, it's a lot to look at, but it's very fascinating. We're told the world is a stage, and my goodness, it certainly is. Before we come to this planet, we choose our own parents. Yes, I know most of you throw your arms up in horror. How did I choose my parents? Well, I know that my father, as the army officer, was perfect for my free spirit because I would have been floating around otherwise. So he taught me how to behave on the planet. He told me what was right and told me what's wrong. And so I was very grateful that I chose him, even though it was quite a strict upbringing. Even chose my brother, believe it or not. So we choose our parents. We also choose who we're going to interact in our lives with. We set the scenes through our emotions. We can throw tantrums if we want to, but it's very much the emotions that are going to set the scene. Then, of course, we put on an act. So often do we put on an act. And of course, depending on how other people are acting, then we will react as well. But we've asked them beforehand to act like that at a subconscious level. So nothing is by accident on this planet. Then, of course, conversations that take place and the interactions, the relationships between people. Divorce is not a bad thing. Breakups are not a bad thing. It's just an end of a scene, end of a chapter, end of an act. It's an opportunity to start again. So throughout life, we have to destruct and then we construct, and we destruct and construct. That is the story of life. And when we get to the end of our act, our life on earth, which comes to all of us at some time, what is everybody going to say about our act? Not that we really care that much, but it is important. What is the energy we're going to leave behind? Are people going to say, gosh, she was so pathetic. She could have done so much more with her life. Look at all her talents, and she never used them. Or are they going to say, fantastic, and give a standing ovation? The greatest cause of disease is fear. And boy, do we have fear on this planet. Huge fear. Intentionally media spread fear, which is what is going on at the moment. But fear is something that is manageable. The thing is to keep saying to ourselves, feel easy and relax. It makes us very vulnerable. And of course, fear needs fear to grow. So the more fearful we become, the more it grows. And therefore, also, what we fear, we attract. Fear also brings out the worst in people. We react badly, we overreact, and so on. So these are sort of things to be aware of when we're doing somebody's feet. What are they really upset about? What is the greatest fear in their life? How can they help themselves to something better so they feel better about themselves? Disease is simply conflict within. A lot of people say they're battling with cancer or they're suffering from a certain illness and so on. It's really, really important to understand the words we use, because the moment we say we're battling with something, it causes a war zone within the body. The moment we are suffering from something, the whole body will start suffering because the body will take on that energy. So we need to be very aware of how we phrase what we are saying to other people. So I do not feel well. Well, about what? What is going on at a deeper level? It's also very easy to understand where disease comes from, the uneasiness comes from. Obviously, we point to the outside world when in fact it's what's going on inside us. What the outside world does is it accentuates or makes us aware of what is going on internally. So anything that is mind-induced, of course, comes from the brain area, and that's very much to do with control. So when we have people who have mind-induced things like Alzheimer's, dementia, and so on, we look straight away at the toes. Difficulty in self-expression would be the neck area. Anything that is airborne is very much to do with our emotions, because of course this is the respiratory area. This is where we take the air in. And what is polluting the atmosphere? Our emotions, our noxious emotions. Every time we breathe out, we fill the air with what is going on in our chest. And of course, the more noxious those emotions, the more they fill and contaminate the air. People tend to blame food, particularly upset stomachs, etc. But food is indicative of what we are taking in our life. Very much what we're doing in our lives, how we're taking things on board or not able to stomach what's going on. Any infection is infuriation that builds up inside about what was done or not done. And that also affects the temperature. Then we have the water-related issues. People go overseas and they blame the water. Maybe they drank a glass of water from the tap and they believe it to be contaminated. What is going on in their communication relationships, I wonder? Why is the water highlighting that? In the home, water is very much to do with communication relationships, feeling overwhelmed or feeling lack of, dehydrated. Then, of course, our basic insecurity is going to affect the bones and the muscles. So straight away, we can start seeing how the outer world mirrors what's going on in the inner world. And from our point of view, that helps to understand what is really going on, what is really upsetting this person and making them feel uneasy. Again, listen to the word headache, aching to get ahead. Any aching is longing for in the body. Depression, that's a good one because I was manic depressive and suicidal, so I do understand this one. But depression is really, if you can understand, if you've been flying around the world in your life, you're sitting in an airplane and you've got this little porthole and you're looking out and you can just see what's going on the tarmac there. And you can just see the airport as well. As the plane starts taking off, you start getting a bigger picture. And you start seeing the airport, and then you start seeing the town the airport's in, and then you get higher and higher, and then you can see more and more of the countryside. But as you're flying up, every now and then, the airplane will go through cloud. And when it's in the cloud, you can't see much. It can get quite bumpy in cloud. That is how I see depression. It's the soul, the spirit taking off and soaring high. But every now and then, it gets to points of uncertainty, being in the dark, not knowing what to do next, and it can get quite bumpy. The good news, though, is the blue skies on the other side. So that's how I see depression. Then we have throat and shoulder disorders, which are very much to do with anxiety of expression, and respiratory self-worth, feeling worthy of taking in the breath of life, and cardiac problems very much to do with heart, a lot of heart issues on this planet. Digestive disturbances, disturbed by what is going on. Now again, this is a very important aspect. So looking at the disorder, something is out of order. Dis-ease, something is uneasy. Disturbed, unsettling. Distress. Can you see the words and how we can listen to what a person is saying? And then we can see if it's out of order, whether they're feeling stressed about it, etc. So what is your problem? Is it the thought of something that makes you sick? Is it the sight of something? The smell, the sound, the taste? Now again, when a person is talking about what's making them uneasy, then we can listen very carefully to what they're saying. It also helps us understand where we can concentrate on the feet as well. So obviously if it's the thought of something, it would be the toes. If it's the sight of something, it would be the balls of the feet. The nose and the ears would be the upper instep. If it's the mouth, it would be communication relationship related to the lower instep. And then finally, if it's the touch, some people the ouch. You can see I break up the words slightly and it's the ouch. Some people have been touched badly in their childhood or even as they're growing up and been abused. But again, remember, we choose the life that we need on this planet to heal ourselves, to become reacquainted with our authentic selves. And the moment we learn not to blame others is the moment we empower ourselves. The symptoms of distress is simply the body telling us what is going on at a deeper level. It's had enough. It can't take any more, so it's going to start shooting out symptoms such as pain. Now, pain is an interesting one because we take on the issues of 7 generations or more. And if you listen to the word pain, pa-in. And a lot of men and boys, when they're growing up, are told, oh, get over it, stop crying now, stop being a baby, be a cowboy. And they learn to suppress their pain. And what actually happens in generations to come, because us women are more emotional and let it all out and so on, a lot of women have taken on their father's pain. This is not to blame, it is to understand. We chose our father, he chose his parents and so on and so forth. So we choose the generations, not just our father and mother, but the generations before, because we have similar issues. So often we manifest the pain, but as we understand that pain and process that pain, we not only release ourselves, but we also release the generations before us, as well as the generations after us. They won't have to go through it in the same way. We have a choice. We can either be a victim, which is very easy to feel sorry for oneself and get everyone else to feel sorry, and it suits many people. Or we can become a victor. We can overcome the situation. And we all play this role on and off, sometimes with the victim and sometimes with the victor. And it's okay. It's okay because that's the way we learn. We have to learn to feel sorry for ourselves so we know how to fix what we're feeling sorry about. Once we overcome the situation, we're that much stronger. Disease is a friend, and it's time we treat it much better. Disease is telling us that something is going on inside us that we created, nothing in the external world. The external world, remember, highlighted it. So we created that uneasiness so we could do something about it. So again, be aware of the language. Everybody has a certain number of cancerous cells in their body because cancer is growing frustration and anger. And it only becomes a threat if it is allowed to go out of control. And again, it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to get better, say to myself, what am I doing to myself? What do I need to do to overcome this situation? What is my story? Why have I created this? And if I understand my story, then I know what I'm dealing with. Then I know what to do. So disease is going to guide us as to what is really, really the issue deep within us. So now we come to the practical aspect, being a practitioner. Now again, it's interesting, the word therapist, the rapist, or practitioner, the person who practices what they're taught. No right, no wrong. It's just, again, being aware of what we are saying. Anybody can do reflexology. It is a gift to us all. Obviously, there's some people who have trained in it, but it's something that we can do for one another, particularly in the lockdown periods and so on. A child can do reflexology. It's very instinctive. But the thing is, there's certain people that know how to go about it in a more professional way. So it's good to be able to do it with one another in the home, but it's also great to go and see a practitioner and really let go. When you're giving reflexology, it's very important again to remember that this is an absolute honor and it's a privilege for another person to put their feet in your hands, to trust you. So again, the thanks within your heart and your soul. Always connect with the higher self. Now, before you even get started, it's best to create a beautiful ambience. Because remember, if the senses are satisfied, then the person can relax. If there is loud noises, then that's going to set the nerves on edge. If there's a horrible smell, the person can't relax. If the sight of the room is a mess and it really doesn't look very inviting, then of course all this is going to affect the senses. So it's really important when the client or the person arrives into the room or the area that it is very relaxing. The smells are beautiful, even if you have flowers or aromatherapies, so that the person can just ease themselves into a relaxed state. The practitioner themselves ideally should not wear jewelry, particularly on the hands. It's best to remove their shoes and to sit with their bare feet flat on the floor to allow the energy to flow freely, straight back, and just to get out of their heads and into their hearts. So once the client is comfortable and the practitioner is comfortable, then we're able to begin. When the practitioner is divinely guided, they are far more intuitive and they can really tune in to the client and their greater needs. When it comes to observing the feet, when you've got the feet there up in front of you, there are certain things that will help you understand where this person is coming from. Again, the shape of the feet is going to give you an idea of how their mind is shaping up and affecting their life. The sensitivity of feet is very much to do with the emotional aspect. Are they oversensitive or totally insensitive? Remember, it's the extremes that are harmful. The stature of feet. Now, when doing the feet, ideally, they should be upright. That helps the energy flow. So when doing the feet, try and keep the feet upright as possible to help that energy flow. We spoke about the size of the feet. And then, of course, if you look at the word skin, you can see that the skin issues are very much related to kin for the family, society. What I find very useful exercise is to ask a person how they feel about their feet. This can be done just before washing their feet and very casually say, oh, how do you feel about your feet? Now, most people will say, I love my feet. And so I would say, so what do you love about your feet? And then you can get an idea of what they feel really comfortable with. But then some people will say, oh, I can't stand my little toe, or I can't stand my insteps. So again, you ask why? Can't you stand your little toe? Why can't you stand your insteps? What is going on? The little toe will tell you about the family society, and the insteps will tell you about the support they perceive they're having. Obviously, there's a lot more to it than that, but that will give you an idea. It's also an area that you could say to them, what would make it better for you? That's better to say actually at the end of the treatment. When doing reflexology or reflexology, we're obviously only touching the surface. And what we need to remember that everything is everything else. In other words, when we think, the thoughts are run through the whole body and affect the whole nervous system. When we breathe, that air is distributed to every single cell in the body, and so on. So we're not just doing that one reflex, we're actually doing many reflexes. And this is why it actually doesn't really matter what the chart looks like in terms of where is the energy going to go, because it's the intent of the practitioner or therapist that will direct that energy, if there is an intent. It's actually just best to leave it up to the universe and let it decide where the energy needs to go, where the person needs it the most. So the energy goes to the very deep levels. Every client is an individual, and so each treatment is unique to that personal needs. The client is constantly changing it, and therefore his needs. What the reflexology does is creates greater awareness, and this is through the alpha state of consciousness into which they drift. It also opens the channels of communications and expression and helps the connection between the inner and outer worlds. It also helps them breathe easy, feel better about themselves, and they find an inner tranquility. It gives them permission to just be, to do what they wish to do at their soul level. And there's overall peace about what they do. They can internalize so much better what is going on in their lives. And they are more acceptable after the treatment of what is going on in their communication relationships. They feel more comfortable and still within themselves. It literally helps them to bring heaven to earth. During the treatment, some amazing things can happen, and these used to really initially freak me out. And don't let it freak you out, because they're quite natural, but I was just so naive, I didn't know what was going to go on. Well, first of all, they go out of their minds, and one of the things is that we keep a lot of our emotion to our chest, so it's very common for them to start snoring, and there are some very interesting snores on this planet. Another thing is that they start twitching, particularly when they have been keeping a lot of tension inside them. They'll also start plucking the cover, particularly if they've got a lot of things that they need to handle and they're not quite sure how to handle them. Then, of course, there's the jerking. They can jerk. The foot can actually come up and almost hit you in the face as the energy goes through to parts it hasn't been for some time. And that was one of the things that freaked me out, because one foot nearly knocked me out. But anyway, it was quite fascinating to watch. They can start levitating, and I can be doing a person's foot and they were taking off the couch. If there hadn't been other people around, I would not have believed it. Then, of course, singing. That was a fascinating one for me. I had a gentleman who sang "The Green, Green Grass of Home" at the top of his voice. And I said to him afterwards, "Oh, do you sing a lot?" He said, "I can't sing." And so basically what had happened is that a part of him that had never been explored started being released. And then fiddling a lot is, again, fiddling because they don't know how to handle the situation. But the most important thing is that it is different for everyone, and whatever happens is perfect for them. Now, ironically, afterwards, a lot of things that have been suppressed can come up. So some people complain that they feel worse after treatment than they did before. Some people develop headaches, particularly when they're aching to get ahead with something and it's not happening. But then, of course, the reflexology will eventually give them the mental clarity once that ache has disappeared. Often they will get a sore throat as the body is clearing what was getting in the way to open the expression. Many of them will cough and even develop a cold to get those things off the chest. The body physically has to release these in order to get better and provide the space to just be. The snoring, as I said earlier, is very much an emotional release, and then of course it improves their image as well. Some people even vomit, and that is getting rid of all the things that are making them sick. So the reflexology will actually bring that to the surface, and their body doesn't need that anymore, so it gets rid of it. acidity can increase, particularly if the person has been very bitter. The reflexology will let them enjoy life that much more and feel satisfied. Some of them end up sweating far more, which is fantastic, because again, it's the body getting rid of the excess waters, the things that they don't need in their communication relationships, and they do tend to urinate rather a lot. So it's all about balance and acceptance. Diarrhea, that's great because that lets go of all the wasteful aspects of life. Skin rashes, allowing things to surface, and discharges can increase as well, like vaginal discharge. But it's all about establishing the security, stability, so the person can progress. So when it comes to the reflexology or reflexology, the most important thing for the person giving the treatment is to get out of their heads and into their hearts. And remember that word fear, feel, easy, and relax. There are many forms of reflexology, but with reflexology we use all our digits because each digit has a really important role to play. There are 4 main movements that we use in reflexology. The most commonly known is the caterpillar. This is generally done with the thumb. But in the reflexology, you can also use all the fingers as well, and you can do it in the other reflexologies as well. There's also the press, rotate, and release. It's a very simple one, particularly when there's congestion. Is just to rest the digit, whichever digit it is, on the point that is most congested or tense, and just to rest it, and then just to rotate, allowing that energy to just dissipate any of the tension, anxiety, and then press a little bit and release. Now, energy is a very important aspect of the touch, and the best way to feel that energy. Now, it's very different for different people. Some people like a firmer pressure. Some people find the lighter pressure of reflexology a little irritating at first. But interesting enough, a very physical person actually needs a lighter movement to lift their spirits and lift their soul, while a very spiritual person will often need a more firm treatment to bring them down to ground. But it varies. There's no one pressure to use throughout the feet. Allow the feet to guide you. Sometimes it'll be harder, sometimes softer, lighter. So the rotation, again, you will feel that energy and decide how much pressure does it require. Another way to feel the energy is to press the hands very close together and just leave them for a while, and then just ease them apart, and you'll start feeling this tingling. And the interesting thing is that the more you take the hands apart, the greater the tingling becomes. It's almost like playing an accordion eventually, that you can play these energies, which is where the distant reflexology plays quite a role. So the lighter energy is often the more effective energy. Just try it on yourself. If you just press really hard, it's still very effective, but when you actually start lifting it and just touch the surface, it's amazingly effective. So there's different pressures. So you've got the press, rotate, and release, and then you've got the milking. This is more emotional. So the milking can be done with 1 digit or 2 together. It's a very beautiful one. And then the feather stroke. This is very much to raise the energies even higher. On each reflex, one would do a bit of caterpillar, one possibly would do a bit of rotation, one would just possibly leave the fingers static. Milking is always important because that helps calm things down and also helps to drain the lymphatic reflexes. And the feathering is very reassuring. So there's all those aspects which are very beautiful. So the hands have a lot of healing energy. We can use the thumb to raise universal consciousness. The second finger is very much about emotional enlightenment. Using the third finger, I know it could be considered rude gesture, but it is a very, very good one for getting the energies activated or even calming them down. It's a very powerful energy. The fourth finger is all about overall balance. And then the little finger, spiritual abundance as well as grounding. When the client or the person receives reflexology or reflexology, they should be able to go into the alpha state of consciousness. This is the state between wakefulness and sleep. It's where they can access the most amazing information from the universe. I have written so many books in that one session of reflexology or Rei-flexology. It is beautiful. It opens up the mind to the unimaginable. The warm-up. The first movement is towards yourself. It's almost like letting an animal sniff you so they get used to your energies and you just don't go in and invade their space immediately. The ankle shake is for greater flexibility, particularly in our communication and relationships. The soul caress is to help calm the person down. The back rub is to help release what has gone on in the past, because that's where we store all our memories and our beliefs. The Achilles pull is to open the person up, to straighten the spine, to help the energies again flow beautifully. And the spinal embrace is to awaken the whole body. So it is possible to give reflexology or Rei-flexology at a distance. And fortunately, this has been happening a lot during lockdown, which has been very, very exciting. The last book that Hodder and Stoughton published came out in 2011. It's a little book and it's called Heal Yourself. And it's a very useful little one if you do wish to practice at home. And of course, doing the feet is like nothing else you experience on this earth. There is no fear when there is truth and faith. So it's okay to stand in your own truth. Be yourself. Stand on your own 2 feet and enjoy a session of reflexology. If you'd like to explore this more, please go to my website, www.alwaysbewithoutthee.com, where you will find information on the 9 books that I have already written on the subject of reflexology, channeling, and the language of the feet, as well as the emotional and spiritual aspects. Remember, healing and health are only 2 feet away.